November the 20th, 2024, and you know why you're here, so let's kick this off, right? And introduce the players. Hey, I am Gerissar, a WoW esports aficionado.
Hey guys, I'm Bigmoran and I'm a Pokemon Pocket TCG aficionado now. And today, actually, Jake is not with us. He's out
Oh.
fighting demons.
Yeah,
And by
internally
demons,
and externally?
yes. Externally, it's BM Hunters and Solo Shuffle, of course.
Interesting. So, Pocket Pokemon, how player
Yes.
versus player is that?
There is a PvP mode.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you assemble a deck, a 20 card deck, and you battle. It's from my understanding, I don't play the actual Pokemon TCG,
Oh.
and from what I understand, it's kind of a watered down version of the game. Admittedly, it's a bit RNG because of that. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are scenarios where based on your opening hand, you just are kind of screwed. But there's still a bit of skill expression there. I mean, here's what I'd say about it. It's really fun. It's pretty simple, but it's just difficult enough to like scratch that itch. It's not simple enough that it's like, oh, this game is for complete casuals. It's like, no, you can still, do some big brain stuff, which I always I find kind of fun with these little, you know, mini games in life, right? It's nice when they're just a little bit challenging.
Mm-hmm. I do like games where, and understanding that we're talking about World of Warcraft mostly, but
Hmm.
there's games when you don't have to memorize thousands of different cards and try
Oh
to
yeah.
know, like, I think that's one of the things that World of Warcraft has kind of against it is that, I mean, you have what, 36 different specs, all with a bunch of different abilities. Some are very similar, but they'll have their own nuances and stuff, right? And I think that's that knowledge ramp you have to get for. And sometimes it's just nice to be able to pick up something and just be like, oh, okay, I have these 5 cards and that's all I have to worry about.
Well, you might be shocked to hear this, but there is a meta in Pokemon TCG. There are decks. You play almost every single,
Yeah,
there's like basically 3 or 4 decks that 80% of players play.
of
And
course.
so really you don't have to memorize too much. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of the nice, like there's like hundreds of cards, but only like 50 of them are actually played. So it actually makes
Okay.
things pretty convenient. By the way, I pride myself on playing a slightly off meta deck. So I'm very
Shut the
happy.
front door. I am
Yes.
shocked.
Going against the grain.
Not you. Are you like, is it like RMP is the normal that everybody does and you're like the WMD or something?
I actually play so one of the most common decks is a Mewtwo deck.
Yeah.
And the deck I play destroys Mewtwo. Um,
Oh.
and I'm sure every Mewtwo player is like, they're having a good time queuing, they're just smashing everyone else, and then they queue into me, and they're like, dang it, like not this guy. Like,
Well, somebody has to. There has to be always that one player, right? It's just like when you do Q nights and you run into that one team that is your counter comp, and you just
I
can't
would like,
shake them.
yes. If I had to describe it in WoW terms, Mewtwo is, the the deck that's gonna win the tournaments, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
playing as I'm like Meat Monk and Frost God Zeke. I'm playing that Frost DK ready to just bang some poor player and knock him
Oh
out of the
boy.
tournament, or I'm like F tier or something, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
playing some weird comp, but it somehow works.
What's a BM Hunter Windwalker? What's this?
Yes.
All right. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. I am somewhat jealous that you have time to play WoW, make videos, and play Pokemon. I am a little jealous. Uh,
Yes.
Speaking of jealousy, though, why don't we talk about the upcoming PvP events, and then we're going to get it because we have a lot to talk about. So we're just going to
Hmm.
jump right into it.
Get in there and fight! Stop hiding!
Yeah. So PvP events, really quick. The list is getting shorter as Blizzard goes through their paces. So the AWC and the MDI, the China group, apparently it was actually played. It's being rebroadcasted yesterday and today. Um, over on the Blizzard channel. So if you guys want to watch that, you can. And then on the 22nd, the MDI Global Finals are going to happen. And that is going to be throughout the weekend, ending on the 24th, where they'll crown the champion and the team that comes away with the most money for doing the best speed running of Mythic Plus dungeons. And to top that off, this weekend as well is our fall shuffle. Yay! So
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited. We're getting quite a number of people that are signing up. I am a little worried though, because we're actually getting an imbalance there. There's I think there's more healers than there is DPS. So we'll have to see who actually shows up on game day on the 23rd, but and who checks in. But right now it's looking in favor that there's too many healers and not enough DPS almost. It's kind of something I wasn't expecting. I was actually expecting there to be a shortage of healers. It's
quite ironic, right? Like there's a healer shortage in the actual, ladder games,
right.
but a healer surplus in this tournament we have.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised, but so I linked the Matcherino link into the Twitch chat. Again, it's going to be in the show notes if you're interested. Once again, the tournament so check-in starts at noon Eastern on Saturday, and then game tournament will start around 1 p.m. Eastern and go until it's done. So, and I think it's going to be you and Jake that are going to be showcasting that, right, Big?
Yes, I will be here.
Yes.
Shoutcasting.
And I will ask for anybody who is listening to just go over to that link. And if you aren't willing to donate some of your hard cash, at least do the quests. They're, I believe they're 10 cents a pop for doing each of the quests. And just by doing that, that adds 10 cents. So 100 people, that's $10, which is awesome. So if you can do that, go for it. And that's it as we know for events. I'm not sure if there's anything else going on right now. Hopefully we hear about something else in the wilds soon for community events. But in the meantime, let's get into the subject analysis and talk about beginner techniques.
I'm gonna light you up, sweet cheeks.
Indeed. So we talked about this Big when we were talking with Agus last podcast, and you guys were talking about how there's the fundamentals of PvP.
Yeah.
You guys were talking mostly about arena, but I think there's several things that can be talked about here that could be used in just open world PvP and BGs as well, because ultimately especially in a rated BG or even a blitz, you can pretty much break everything down to some sort of either 2v2, 3v3, or 5v5,
right,
give or take a bit. So I think what if somebody was coming to you and said, I don't know anything, what is the most beginnerist thing that I need to know for PvP? What would you tell them?
I really think one of the best fundamentals is just character control. Can you move your character quickly? Can you maneuver around tight spaces? Are you strafing versus are you keyboard turning? I think these things matter quite a bit because it's often quite apparent. Seeing it's very obvious when you see someone in a battleground, for instance, and you can kind of tell just by their movement that they're a beginner player. And you can kind of tell that, when you start attacking them, it's like, well, they start backpedaling and whatnot. And it doesn't seem like it would be that big of a deal, but it really does matter because it's sort of like almost like driving a car, right? Like it's sort of like the fundamental thing. It's like sort of having control over the car, like obeying the speed limit and paying attention to your surroundings. And to do all of that, you kind of need to have this basic sort of mechanical skill of just like control over the vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very analogous to that. And
So
if yeah,
I just want to make sure. So when you're saying turning, you're talking about using the mouse turn, which I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are like, Gerissar, are you being such a noob? But I just want to, like, if we're really talking beginner techniques, if somebody came up to you and said, I don't know what I'm doing, you're talking about teaching them how to use mouse to turn and mouse movement to control the character while using keybinds in order to cast their spells and do everything.
Yes, and another part of that too is camera control. If you're moving your character kind of with your mouse, you have smooth movement, and you're able to sort of maneuver in very tight spaces and with a lot of accuracy. I mean, the next step is just having good character, good camera control, because so much about PvP, not just arena, but also, I mean, more so BGs, is you kind of need to see what's going on around you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever watched the best BG Blitz players, not only do they have all three of these things, but they kind of have that additional step of opening their mini map constantly and seeing objectives.
Yeah.
So it's one thing that sort of builds from the other, and if you aren't comfortable moving your character, everything else is just going to be a bit unstable. You need that solid foundation, I think, of basic character movement.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I know how important character movement has become now that I learned how to do it. But
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like, I remember, back in my beginner days, running around arena, keyboard turning, clicking abilities with the mouse, not keybinds. Except
Yeah.
for, like, I think 1, 2, 3, I think it was, but otherwise my hand was pretty much fixed on WASD. Um, Occasionally I get frustrated, as a warlock. Uh, my camera would get in a wrong place, so when I went to, like, place, let's say, put down a portal or rain down, rain down an infernal, and end up getting caught in, like, a lantern in the rafters or something like that, because that's where
Mm-hmm.
the reticle went to. um so I can see that. I think, so arguably, if I was to argue with you, why is backpedaling bad? Because I know that if I turn my back to something, they're going to hit me harder. But
Yeah.
so
I mean,
how do I do that?
so backpedaling isn't always bad. Like, it's not full stop bad, but anything that forces you to move slower is always going to be worse. So
Uh,
if you're snared, for instance, it doesn't really matter too much if you're backpedaling, to be honest.
mhm,
But say you're not snared and you have complete control of your character, backpedaling is just basically nerfing your mobility, which kind of has this weird snowball effect where everything else can kind of be impacted by that.
mhm,
So that's sort of the thing that I think I've said this before on the podcast, maybe not, but if Blizzard were to buff the mobility of, let's just say, a Boomkin by 100%,
mhm,
they buff Boomkin mobility. Well, that's going to buff every part of their toolkit. If you're moving faster, that means it's easier to avoid damage.
mhm.
That means it's easier to stay connected on targets. That means it's easier to position for CC. Everything sort of starts with movement. So any nerf to mobility is going to be nerf to your entire toolkit as well. So that's essentially why backpedaling is bad. It makes you slower, and that kind of has a trickle-down effect.
Fair. And so how does jumping tie into that?
So this is a bit... jumping is... Gosh, I'm really bad at... I'm going to butcher the explanation of this. But jumping is a way to solve certain key binding problems.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain combinations of keys that are kind of hard to press in a sequential way. And so by jumping, you sort of like momentarily free your hand to press a different ability. Or it allows you to carry momentum
Mm-hmm.
in a direction and still use an ability. So for
So,
instance, say you're pressing forward with
yep,
W,
yep.
and you need to press your, like, number 2 or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Well, in order to go from W to 2, which I use I would use my middle finger for both of those.
Yep.
You have to take your finger off W,
Yeah.
which means you stop moving. So instead, if you hold down W and you jump, you're still moving in the air, and you can still press your number 2 midair. So you kind of
Mhm.
can keep your momentum.
Okay. And that's I run into that when I'm trying to do my corruption, let's say, or my curse of agony, because it's an instant cast. But that's my
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, But wouldn't you be able to do the same thing just by if your mouse moving, you use your 2 buttons on your mouse that moves you forward. Now you don't have a finger on 2. You can then
Yeah. You definitely could, but it's just it gives you another option, right?
oh,
Like
fair,
you
fair.
if your mouse is being used for something else in the moment,
Mhm.
then you can jump.
Okay. All right. I like it. And I think those are some very basic but very important uh, uh, techniques that people need to, and you can use that in any PvP. Like that's definitely world PvP, BGs, arenas, doesn't matter. Some very basic stuff. It's just on how you move your camera around. Make sure you see what's happening. See,
Mhm.
and then yeah, definitely, especially if you're in threes or even in twos in arena, seeing where your partner is, seeing what the other team is doing. Um, I think so. Just to make it a bit more intermediate, though, do you have any words of wisdom to stop? Like, I can be zoomed out all the way, but if I get myopic in a tunnel vision, when because like okay, I'm on this warrior or I'm on this mage, and I see them run into the pillar. They're gonna go hide behind the pillar, and my God, I think I got them. I know I'm gonna get them. I just have to get there, and I can push this one other big cast, and I know I'm gonna kill them. And like, how do I stop tunnel visioning on that, and then open up my vision and away from that center screen, that character right in the middle of my screen, and notice that my healer's in CC, or that my healer's behind a pillar somewhere else, and I'm about to actually line of sight them so they can't heal me and I'm about to die.
Yeah, it's tricky because tunnel vision is kind of not just one problem that in isolation, it's sort of a bunch of different things happening at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, so one sort of immediate culprit of tunnel vision can simply just be having a bit of, I don't want to say insecurity, but a bit of not basically not having your rotation be second nature. If your rotation isn't second nature, inevitably you're going to have to think about what buttons you're going to press, and that's going to sort of drive your attention away from other things on your screen. That can be one culprit, uh, but it can also just be as simply like a UI problem as well. Um, as much as people don't like add-ons, you go to the forums and everyone's hating on add-ons, for
Yep.
sometimes for a good reason.
Yep.
I mean, add-ons can help you solve some attention problems in PvP for sure. I mean, that's what they're there for, right? They're basically
Mhm.
just magnifying lenses on different parts of your screen. Um, and it's really hard to play PvP seriously without any add-ons whatsoever. Um, Tunnel
True.
vision is also just one of those things. It's one of those things in WoW that just kind of can go away with time. And this is a really difficult thing, I think, for it's a difficult uh, teaching lesson. For instance, I had a Resto Druid asking me a similar question, or like, I'm always tunnel visioning my health bars.
Hmm.
I'm staring at my party frames and raid frames 24/7 as a Resto Druid because I want to keep pots up. Like, how do I stop myself from doing this? It's like, well, at a certain point of playing Resto Druid, you kind of know intuitively how long your hots last, and you kind of store that memory, and you kind of can sort of remember when's the last time you put up life bloom on a target, and you kind of remember that. It's like you get a feel for these things over time.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, some of these problems just go away with playing your character more and sort of knowing, your dot timers, or knowing the cooldown of Mortal Strike and kind of feeling it, right? And so things like that can help as well. I mean, again, tunnel vision is sort of a difficult problem to just solve with one solution. It's kind of a bunch of different things happening simultaneously.
Fair. I think tunnel vision is like, for me, I know that it is a natural body reaction I have to stress. Um,
Yes.
and so obviously arena's fairly stressful. Um, I have to constantly remind myself to look away from the middle of the screen and look to the bars, to the
Yeah.
Gladius or the S Arena. And I think that's about the only thing I can do, and I struggle with it
Oh.
every game.
Well, you just reminded me of something. Another kind of fix to tunnel vision. I mean, the ultimate fix to tunnel vision as a DPS player is when you start just kind of paying attention to nameplates.
Mhm.
Because nameplates, when you think about it, are kind of this all-encompassing UI element. They give you the enemy team's positioning. Depending on your add-ons, they can also tell you what defensive cooldowns the enemy players have, what offensive cooldowns they have, what debuffs they have. All this information is kind of stored in nameplates. It's sort of the ultimate UI element.
Mhm.
So if you can start paying more attention to nameplates, you'll find that kind of have a better view of the battleground or the arena than before. As a DPS player, it's not as straightforward as a healer, but
Mhm.
I mean, nameplates can definitely help you as a healer as well. Enemy nameplates, that is. So that's just one, I guess, sort of, if you're trying to get if you're trying to reach a destination with solving tunnel vision, sort of that destination is nameplates.
Yeah.
Once you can start paying attention to those, everything sort of falls into place.
Here's as a healer, you play with all nameplates on, friendly and enemy.
Um, kind of. I play with enemy nameplates,
Mhm.
like the bars, but I basically use better Blizz plates to show icons above my friendly uh
Okay.
teammates. They're not bars, but they're just like symbols.
See.
That
Okay.
that makes it a bit easier to see where
Yeah.
your teammates are positioned.
Yeah. I've
And
seen
I would
that.
highly, yeah, that is like a godsend as a healer.
Mhm.
I mean, I know Blizzard has like the built-in raid markers, but
Yeah.
they're not that great. They're kind of small. I mean, it's so much better to play with better Blizz plates, and I mean, especially in solo shuffle,
Yeah.
because people are running around pillars all day.
Indeed. Uh, I guess that leads to the other thing then is, there's a movement thing. Uh, how do you teach somebody to not run around the pillar and line of sight you?
So I mean, that's sort of the classic DPS tunnel vision, right?
Yeah.
Is not knowing where your healer is. I don't think you have to know where your healer is at all times. But it's probably a bit useful to think of where your healer might be.
Hmm.
Uh, so for instance, if you're playing warrior and it's Nagrand Arena and it's the very beginning of the game, if you heroic leap across the map and then charge the enemy player and then go behind your pillar, I mean, you kind of know that you're going to be out of LOS. Like, there's no way your healer is going to be anywhere near you at that
Yeah.
time. So you kind of have to think of maybe where your healer might be. And then again, you can use better Blizz plates to put a massive green cross above your healer, so it kind of makes it easier to see where they're positioned. And
Fair.
again, everything is kind of solved by add-ons.
Yeah, it keeps coming back to the add-ons. Okay, so let's talk about add-ons. Let's just get this out of the way.
Yeah.
So, what are the essentials? I know what the answer is going to be, but I'll let you list them off because I know you have, you've done a bunch of work on this. There's the Steel Tap add-on that helps out with a bunch of stuff and leads onto a bunch of add-ons. So what's the most required?
I think There are definitely 4, and we can maybe even think of 5 or 6. I think some sort of enemy unit frame add-on is 100% required.
Mhm.
If you're playing Arena, it's either going to be Gladius or S Arena,
Yep.
and if you play Battlegrounds, it's going to be Battleground enemies.
Mhm.
It seems like it's not really that necessary at first. At least the Arena frame add-on, you might be like, oh, why do I need that when there's the built-in Blizzard ones?
Mhm.
But you just get so much additional information.
Oh yeah.
Not all that information is going to be useful to you immediately, but it's going to help you, like in the long run, to just kind of have some comfortable enemy arena frames to
Mhm.
be paying attention to. So I think that's number 1. Number 2 is going to be Omnibar. This specifically for arena, but it's also pretty good for BGs as well. Omnibar simply just tracks enemy cooldowns, and again, that might seem like it's sort of getting into advanced territory, but there's some basic enemy cooldowns that are just worth tracking no matter what. So if you play a caster or a healer, you should definitely track enemy interrupts. That's sort of the bare minimum, is track enemy interrupts. If you're a melee, you don't necessarily have to track interrupts, but it can still be useful in some cases too. Um, then if you play DPS, it's also useful to track enemy defensives. But again, this is kind of getting more into advanced territory.
Mhm.
But in any case, Omnibar, knowing, there's no way within the game itself to track enemy cooldowns, so you basically need an add-on to do that, and Omnibar is sort of the de facto add-on. Then, of course, can't talk about add-ons without talking about weak auras. Weak auras does a lot of different things, right? I mean, it's kind of the add-on of all add-ons. But I think for a beginner or intermediate player, tracking enemy offensive cooldowns with some sort of weak aura package is sort of the bare minimum. If you can have some sort of sound alert whenever the enemy team pops offensives, I mean, that's going to sort of signal to you when it's time to play defense and whatnot. And weak auras just solve a bunch of problems. And again, like making some maybe class specific weak auras are going to be useful too. Um, then big debuffs or omni auras, I think it also should be included in every UI. It just amplifies information on your screen that is otherwise a bit harder to see. For instance, as it will increase the size of CC debuffs on your raid frames.
Yep.
As a healer, that's really important because it allows you to dispel, your teammates out of CC quickly. Or if you're DPS, it allows you to notice when your healer is in CC easier.
Also important.
Yes. And I see you've added WoW arena logs, and I
Mhm.
think, yeah, any sort of, I mean, that's a really useful tool. Not only for helping yourself, but sort of helping the community, right? Like it's sort of a that you can see so much from log data, and that can kind of help you understand the game a little bit better, and you
Yeah.
get a nice little recap of the games
Well,
with
that's why I put it, because I think a lot of people, what they do is they look at details, because everybody else has that as well, to see how well they
yeah,
did or see what their death log was, and the death log only shows like the last 30 seconds, right?
yeah,
WoW arena logs will show you the whole game, but you can ask, if you look at if you look at details, it tells you why you died. Is that you took this damage, this damage, this damage, this damage, maybe a heal or two, maybe not, and then you died to something. But
yeah,
the why did you take all that damage and only maybe a heal, or oh look, that was just the tail end of a regrowth, and that was it, right? Or some hot maybe.
right,
Why did you not get any more heals? Well, if you scroll back further on arena logs, you can see that your healer was in the middle of a CC, right?
right, yeah,
Or or they were rooted or something. And you can roll back, you can find the other whys, right? They well, why were they stuck in a CC? Oh, well, that's because they blew their trinket the last CC. Well, why did they do that? Well, it's because you were about to die, and they blew the trinket to then heal you, and that. So, um, I feel
yeah,
I feel WAL does a much better job of answering the why did I die, and it moves it back, 8 different pieces instead of just the, oh, I was in a checkmate situation because they moved their rook into the spot and I was checkmate. It's like, okay, well, how'd you get there? Right.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency for people to use details in an unproductive way, where
Yeah.
they die and they instinctively open up the details death log. They see
Mhm.
something that makes them upset, and they don't really know what to do with that information, and that information is usually not that productive.
Yeah.
Details is great for sort of diagnosing maybe rotational problems.
Mm-hmm.
If you if you go to your healing or damage breakdown and a spell is at the top that shouldn't be at the top, I mean, it's like, well, that's a clear signal to
Yeah.
what how you can improve your healing. But yeah, I would agree that having WoW arena logs maybe is something that more people should consider
Mm-hmm.
as part of their UI, and it's very. I mean, it literally just reads the combat log. It doesn't record. I mean, you can have it. There are some programs where it does record your gameplay, but WoW Arena Log just logs everything to like a
Uh,
text file or something. So it's pretty lightweight. You
mm-hmm.
don't need a crazy computer or anything to run it.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure they have a video selection in it too, so it can record the gameplay.
Yeah. Okay.
But
That
then
makes
there's
sense.
also Warcraft Recorder, who we also support. But I think
Yeah.
that's getting into your very. I think that's moving beyond intermediate and getting into your expert gameplay, because then you're. Actually, I don't know, or maybe I'm wrong, because you could see your positioning, you can see your movement and that stuff as well in the video. So maybe you should do that if your computer can handle it.
Right.
One last one. What about reflex for data log record? Your ups and your downs. What do you think?
I've never used it before. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't really see the point if I'm being honest. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess if it's so lightweight, like why not?
Yeah.
But it reminds me of something I heard recently about, people use those watches for sleep.
Yep.
Uh, it's like
Yep.
sometimes you have to ask yourself, are those actually useful? Because if you're not getting good sleep all the time, having a watch isn't going to necessarily help you get better sleep.
No.
It's one, or if you're already getting good sleep, having the watch isn't gonna suddenly make you have even better. So it's sort of
Mm.
like one of those things. Like, yeah, okay, maybe it's cool information, but
Yeah.
is it useful information? Not really.
I think
um,
I think it's useful if it points out something that you're not noticing, right? Like, just like
yes,
details can point out some stuff, like you said, rotationally you're not noticing. A watch that monitors your sleep pattern will note that maybe at 3 o'clock in the morning you're always waking up. You're moving out of deep sleep into light sleep for some, maybe you're fully waking, but your brain doesn't register it, like
right.
you're still asleep, and that could be because at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's when the raccoons are dancing around your garbage cans and wake you up, right?
It's my cat.
Yeah,
My cat.
right.
At 5 a.m. every morning, I
Hell or high water, that thing's waking.
inevitably
Yep.
wake up,
So
and
so I think something like reflex can point out, like, if you're queuing on Tuesday nights, you're not doing so well,
yeah,
versus on your Saturday queues, you're awesome. You're like, you move, you make a bunch of gains. Obviously, some of those gains are the gains or the regaining what you lost on Tuesday, but you're gaining.
or yeah, or I've been on this crusade against holy paladins.
Yeah.
I think, based on my experience, I feel like I lose to holy paladins a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's not true. Maybe if I had reflex, I could say, oh, I actually have a 50% win loss. Maybe it's not as bad as I think,
Yeah.
right?
fifty
But I
percent
know
win
I'm
loss is
pretty sure
actually really good. It's
yeah, I'm pretty sure that they still need to be nerfed. But I digress.
Let's be honest, you're not going to be happy unless druids are number one.
Hey, I'm fine with druids not being number one, but Man, there is something so Holy Paladins, at least in my perspective, they kind of have it all. That's the thing with the good healers right now. They kind of are a complete package, you know. They
Mm,
Paladins, Disc Priests, and Mistweaver Monks. They have really, really good. Well, Mistweaver Monks not so much, but Paladins and Disc Priests especially. They have really, really good cooldowns. They have really, really good healing output, and they don't die. So they kind of like check all the boxes of like what can make a healer OP.
yeah.
And the other healers, it's kind of like, oh, you have to check maybe 2 of those boxes or just 1. Uh, but right now, I mean, those healers are checking all 3 boxes, and it's like, wow, come on. Like, I I kind of like
Yeah.
it when so my hot take. Not I don't want to go on too much of a side quest here, but my hot take is that healers shouldn't be OP. I think it's bad when healers are too strong. So I think it's when
Yeah.
it's good when every healer's just a little bit weak. Not
Mhm.
super weak, but just a little like if they have just some weakness, they're A tier, that's fine. I don't want healers to be Giga S tier, I don't think that should be
Mhm.
allowed.
I
But
think
I know
I think
some
in
people disagree.
season 1 it's okay for healers to be a little OP. In
Yeah.
season 2, 3 and beyond, no way, because your off healing is so strong because of all the stat the shamans, their mastery is off the charts by then, so your Ellie's and your enhancements can off heal like nothing. Your feral and your boomies can off heal. The shadow priest can off heal. Like it's all just crazy off healing that I feel that that's definitely when the main healer specs should be A tier. But I think in season 1 it's okay for them to be S tier.
Yeah, and typically what happens is the game slows down a little bit
Mhm.
in the later seasons.
Yeah.
Not always, but sometimes it slows down. And when the game is a little bit slower, healers being super strong means the games are even slower,
Oh,
and
super
then
damp.
that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, and then you get into an unfun situation.
Who doesn't like it damp?
Yeah.
Actually, those seasons is so damp it's wet. Um,
Yes.
so here's running back to arena add-ons, or just PvP add-ons, let's say. So obviously, Gladius and Battleground enemies, those will only work when you're in the instanced PvP. They don't work for you when you're in open world. Unlike
Yep.
Omnivar, weak auras, big debuffs, all that stuff will work for you in open world. Again, arena logs only works in the instance because it has to have that trigger of joining and leaving the instance for the combat logs. Um,
Mhm.
so as a new player, I'm like, okay, I'm just listening to Gerissar and Bigmoran, and they said I have to get these ones, so I installed them. And what the heck is all this crap on my screen? Like information overload.
Yeah. Well,
How do you help that?
yeah, I think that's why suggested. I think the like Gladius doesn't really clutter your UI that much. Omnibar can feel a bit cluttering, but if you set it up to only track interrupts, you can cut down on that clutter dramatically. Weak auras, that's its own animal. I mean, that can be as cluttered as you want it to be.
Yeah.
Um, Big debuffs is so non-intrusive that there's really no reason to use it. I can't think of one situation where you'd be better off not using it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just gonna increase the size of some debuffs, not all of them, and the important
Yeah.
ones. So that's
Yeah.
that's you know,
So
and
so
then
so what I'm hearing
yeah,
is I have to not only I have to be choosy on what weak cores I install, but also like for Omnibar, I don't just go with the default. Get into the settings, look at all the different settings, look at what it's going to put up, and figure out what those things are that I need, and then
yeah.
know what they are so that I can understand what that symbol means instead of just having a spam of crap on my screen and not knowing what I'm looking at.
Yeah, there's a sweet spot with UIs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to plug too much, but I think what we did with the skill cap UI is kind of approaching that sweet spot. I
Yeah.
mean, people might disagree, but it kind of has all the information you would ever need. No more, no less. And we kind of made it. I mean, you could argue that our omnibar is a bit maybe intrusive, but for the most part, everything we include is just kind of non-intrusive, and
Yeah.
it's going to help you no matter what your rating. And it's all symmetrical. It looks, pretty neat and organized.
Goes to the
There's
point.
some,
Yeah.
yes, I mean, geez, I can't tell you how many times I tune into people's streams or, watch someone's YouTube video. It's like they just have a UI that's so chaotic. And,
Yeah.
sometimes these are the same players who are like, what about there's who complain about information overload? I'm like,
Yeah.
you have a UI you have a disinformation overload on your screen right now.
Yeah.
Like there's too much nonsense going on,
Do you ever watch the
So,
movie Ready Player One?
oh no, I haven't.
Oh, you have it? Okay, there's a scene where they're talking about what the plans are for the field of vision,
Yeah.
and like fill it up with all these ads and everything. And it's like so instead of like the gameplay and you have like a little thing, a couple little bars for like health or whatever or stuff like that. It's like all ads and everything. It's like, oh, two, we figure that we can cover 80% of the vision before causing synaptic overload. It's like I seriously feel that when I walk into some people's streams. And it's just like I can't even see what's happening on the field. It's just like weak auras and buffs and bars, and it's insane. So
Yeah, I think circling back to being a beginner player and an
mhm,
intermediate player, a good way to sort of fix your UI is just to record your gameplay, maybe,
mhm,
and or just take a screenshot of your UI in the middle of a game and ask yourself, am I looking at this add-on ever? If the answer is no, then just remove it. If you're not using it, there's
yeah,
no reason to have it on your screen, right?
yep,
Um, so, I mean, sometimes people think they need all of this information,
yep,
right out of the gates. It's like, no, probably not.
mhm,
The focus on sort of, again, we're going to circle back to this idea of foundation, circle back to this foundational information, and then sort of build from there. I mean, add-ons solve problems, and they only solve problems that you are having, and you're right, they're
yes,
tools.
yep,
So, don't try to solve a problem you're not having yet, right? Um, because that might be hurting your ability to solve other problems.
yeah,
So
that
start with
makes
the
sense.
basics.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, oh, pardon me, burp, burp. Uh, so okay, now I was looking at the list here. Now I said don't worry about rotation because like rotation, you should kind of know it, right? But you said it's important.
Yes, it
I mean, obviously
it's
rotation is important, but what? Sorry, I just interrupted you. Go ahead.
so people. Gosh, I want to say this without sounding like an elitist, but I'm going to sound like an elitist. I think no matter what, people tend to think that they're doing their damage well,
Mhm.
and they think, oh, I know my rotation. I'm doing it perfectly. I can tell you with 100% certainty that even rank 1 players are not doing their rotation perfectly. Um, there are very few players in this game who are truly like exceptional at dealing damage.
Mhm.
It's players like Trill, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're a Trill, there's a pretty high chance that some part of your rotation is being suboptimal in the middle of an actual arena game. You can hit the target dummy all you want and practice with that, and that's definitely helpful. But honing in and doing optimal damage and especially optimal healing is really, really important these days. You get a lot of like if there's one thing that you could just get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of improving, it's always going to be rotation. Always. You can have bad positioning, you can be kind of bad at trading defensive cooldowns, which we might get to in a sec. Damage is the one thing that can just sort of mask those problems. If you're doing really good damage and you're doing really good burst, you are probably capable of getting 2K rated. At least like probably 1800. If you can do really good damage, you're probably capable of doing getting 1800, 1600, 1800, 2K, somewhere in that range. At minimum, you're probably capable of those ratings. And I truly believe that. Especially as a healer. Right now, healing is very hard, and there's no way around it. You have to do your rotation almost perfectly, because the way Blizzard sort of designed rotations these days is they're kind of like, it's not really a rotation and it's not really a priority system. I mean, it is, but it isn't. I'll explain it in a sec. It's more like a gameplay loop. Every healer sort of has this gameplay loop, like this sort of sequence of abilities they kind of circle around constantly the entire game. And the reason that loop exists is because of modifiers. So a lot of healers have this order that they need to be using their heals in order to just buff the heck out of one of their heals. I'll give you a really good example. Disc Priest. So Disc Priest have this talent called Wheel and Woe. Wheel and Woe means causes every bolt of penance that you fire to increase the absorption of your next power word shield by, I think, 10%. So what this means is that if you penance before your shield is going to be bigger. Now you could take this a step further by pressing Radiance before your penance, because Radiance gives you a buff that increases the amount of penance bolts you fire. So if you Radiance, you get a bunch of penance bolts. Those penances buff your shield. So you just kind of get this natural gameplay loop of Radiance, penance, shield. And so you can kind of see, well, a Disc Priest might say, oh, I'm healing properly. I'm shielding on cooldown, and I'm using penance on cooldown. It's like, well, what order are you using those, right? That matters a lot. And a lot of healing rotations are like this. They sort of loop in this way to buff the heck out of one of your heals, and if you're not doing that, you're gonna struggle.
But so this is the problem though I always run into is I know my rotation, but I can never get it off because I'm interrupted. Now I'm locked out of that school. Oh, I got cycloned or I got CC'd. Well, now the buff fell off and now I have to go back and restart my rotation. I was about to get the cast off and they ran around the pillar and lined of sighted, so then it didn't happen. Oh, okay, now I have to find another target and I have to restart my rotation.
Right. And this is why I said, like, you can practice your rotation all day on a dummy. It's going to be helpful, but I mean, you really need to practice your rotation in the actual environment that it's going to be used. And of course, yeah, I mean, if you play an Affliction Warlock or a Shadow Priest, you're going to have to deal with problems that other casters don't have to deal with so much. But again, it's unfortunately one of those things that just kind of takes a little bit of time. I mean, juking and, faking kicks, it's definitely something that, I mean, I have it in the notes here.
Yep.
That's definitely something that I think if you're wanting to make that transition between a beginner and intermediate player, you have to sort of develop juking skills. I mean, we can talk about that if you
Let's get
want
into
now.
it. But yeah, it's part of being able to do your rotation. As soon as you're able to juke and fake kicks and know when it's free to cast and get your full rotation off instead of like getting kicked and then having to restart, like, because I apparently don't know how to do that well. I'll admit that. So yeah. So okay, so obviously juking or faking is when you start casting and then you stop casting in hopes that you trigger somebody to waste a kick on you, right?
Yes.
And
You
then
get to
that's
get that
where
precog.
so that gives you precog if you have the gem, and that's using your omnibar to see their kick go on cooldown.
Yes.
This also means you have to know what. So like, let's say you're what? So let's say you're up against enhancement or Ellie and warrior, right? So you have to worry about wind shear and pummel.
Right.
and
You
grounding
have to know
totem
that.
if you're a caster.
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah, I mean that's sure. I mean that will be something that's useful. I think what you just said is really important because some kicks are melee range, some kicks are ranged.
Mhm.
So that's an important distinction too. But in terms of the mechanics of juking, I think it's pretty straightforward, and
Yeah.
it's sort of easy to intuit. Um, so if you think about what it takes to interrupt a spell, that player has to see that spell on their screen.
Mhm.
They have to see the cast bar and they have to react to that, right? And you can take a reaction test online. There's plenty of websites where you can just take a visual reaction speed test. I think the average like visual reaction time is around 200 milliseconds, like
Sounds about
200 to
right.
300.
Mhm.
So for a fact that most players will only start to see or process the fact that you're casting like 0.2 to 0.3 seconds into that cast. So you never have to juke super, super early. Never. Unless unless you're dealing with a bot. Then you have to juke as early as possible sometimes.
Just thought of that.
But yes, but assuming you're playing as a human player, you can
Mhm.
sort of count on the fact that they're not going to see that. Their brain is not going to understand that you're casting for 0.2 seconds. Okay. So then you have to kind of take into consideration, well, are they immediately going to be able to press a key on their keyboard? Well, maybe that's going to add like maybe 50 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds. So you know that the juking range probably starts around 300 milliseconds. Okay. Now you have to sort of so now we have that information. Now we kind of have to sort of play around the enemy player. Like this is where the mind games comes into play.
Yeah.
All right.
You're not talking about the
There are
spell.
right,
Sorry.
no, not the spell. So players sort of kick differently at different ratings.
Mhm.
So lower rated players tend to lower rated players are actually ironically sometimes harder to juke because it's quite random. But you can either count on them trying to kick sort of in the middle of it, like somewhere between the beginning and the middle of your cast, or not kick at all. That's
Mhm.
what can kind of make it difficult. Is like they either kick or they don't. But if they kick, it's usually going to be somewhere in the beginning of the cast.
Yeah.
Um, and sort of intermediate players who are maybe playing around 1800 to 2K, they try to kick really quick typically. So I
Really?
mean, they think they think they're being peekaboo by just kicking really quick every single time. Like
Mhm.
they think that's the cool thing to kick really fast. And so with those sort of players, once you hit that visual cortex benchmark of like 200 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds, you can try to consistently fake there, okay?
Yeah.
And there's a high chance you're going to get they're going to proc your precog.
Yeah.
Now, before I go any further, what's really important is that when you are juking, you're not just juking. So
Uh-huh.
it's good to weave in some sort of instant spell in between your jukes, if you have one.
Okay.
If you ever watch Chanimal play Warlock, he's juking a lot. But in between, he's always, refreshing his corruption or whatever, refreshing agony. He's always pressing something in between his fakes. He's not just standing there faking over and over and over. That's what we call like faking yourself to death. To faking yourself to death. At that point, it's just better to just kind of get interrupted. If you're just like think of it this way: if you're sitting there spam faking for 4 seconds in a row,
Mhm.
you could have just taken the interrupt, which is 4 seconds,
Yeah.
and moved on, right? So you want to, be faking and in between pressing an ability. The other thing
Mhm.
too, before I go on, is most casters have more than one spell school.
Yep.
So if you are committing to a cast or you do get interrupted, you should already kind of be thinking about what ability you might be pressing next.
Mhm.
'Cause you can typically always press something. Not always, but if you play Arcane Mage, you have Ring of Fire as an option or Frost Nova, you can always press something. That's really
Yeah.
important. So doing both of those things will help you avoid what we call dead globals. And it just means a period of time where you don't press anything. So that's really important. All right. So now,
I want to
yeah,
highlight that we've seen this in the AWC where televised games and the healer is like fake casting, trying to juke a kick or get a kick out of somebody to then be able to cast the heal, and they're so busy juking that their friend dies because they never got the
yeah,
heal off.
yeah, and sometimes, for instance, when I'm playing my Resto Druid, sometimes I don't care if I get interrupted because I have HOTS.
Mm-hmm.
I it's totally fine for me to tank an interrupt at some points if it means my HOTS are still on the target and they're doing their work. There's certainly bad times to take a kick, but there's also good times to be interrupted.
Yeah,
Um, then we're kind of getting into advanced territory there. Like
sure.
that's sort of, but I think if you can understand, I think that
Well,
the TLDR, yeah,
I was gonna say there is the other advanced technique of baiting the kick and eating it yourself. So then your healer, as a DPS, then your healer can cast.
right. This is how some comps actually function. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's called Double Dragon, Preservation Evoker, Devastation Evoker, and then whatever high tier melee, whatever is the best melee at the time. Right now it's Feral Druid. So
Yeah,
there you have 3 cast bars. You have the Devastation Evoker casting, Preservation Evoker casting, and the Feral Druid casting Cyclone. I mean, that comp works because it doesn't matter who gets kicked. They can all
yeah,
sort of play off of one another. So
yeah.
it's really important. Um,
All right.
but I want to quickly wrap up interrupts with one
Yes.
thing. What's interesting is the best players, the way that they typically kick is at the very, very, very end of a cast.
Yes.
Uh, that's really hard to juke. uh, if you ever get into a situation where you're playing against one of these like late kickers,
Mhm.
oof, I mean, good luck faking. It's gonna be
Yeah.
very hard. Those are the worst to deal with.
I will say that is also very hard because you have to be very cognizant of what your ping is or have like really
Yes.
negligent ping. Because if you're sitting at like 100 plus ping, like you have to factor that into when you're trying to kick at the tail end. Because if you're within that 100 milliseconds, the server's probably going to register that you missed, that the cast went off. So now their cast went off, you kicked, now they have precog, so now you can't even, now there's no interrupting, and they got their cast off to begin with.
You're right.
So, okay,
Yeah, it's tricky.
it is. Gosh, I love this game, but it's tricky.
Yes.
All right. So one other part, and this goes back to doing your rotation. Now, so doing the rotation is obviously the DPS. That's just getting the damage out or getting the heals out, really. So
Yep.
HPS as well. Um, and I like that idea of like, okay, do a long cast, juke, instant. So I can do like Shadow Bolt, no cancel, uh, do whatever, some instant cast, do a corruption.
Yeah.
Okay, go back to do my Shadow Bolt. Okay, do Curse of Agony, back to my Shadow Bolt. Um, is it worthwhile doing that with focus macros, or should I use focus macros only for CC?
I think most players will benefit enormously from having, especially if you're again going from beginner to intermediate, if you have your focus macro for your interrupt and for your main crowd control, or maybe 2 of your main crowd controls.
Why is that?
Oh, so if you're, for instance, playing, it's, I mean, this really only applies to, let me think, Rogue, Survival Hunter, or not Rogue and Hunter. Um, like Rogue, you have focus kidney shot. You can focus kidney shot. You can
Mm-hmm.
focus gouge. You can focus disarm. You can focus blind. I mean, Rogue is kind of the thing where you kind of need a lot of macros, maybe more than any
Yeah.
other spec. But say, for instance, you're playing Warlock. Warlock it can also be kind of confusing because you have your interrupt, and you have fear, but you also have coil.
Yep.
And you might have havoc. There's certain things that might want to throw in there too, but definitely having your interrupt or having a focus interrupt macro is really good, and a focus main CC, whatever that is.
Okay.
Fear, polymorph, cyclone, hex.
Yeah.
That's gonna get you the most value. People, I think, tend to misunderstand what the focus frame is for. I've heard people say, well, why do I need a focus frame if I already have Gladius? And I want to use Arena 1, 2, 3. And maybe it's an old school thing, admittedly, but I'm guessing it is actually kind of an old school thing. But I mean, back in the day before Arena 1, 2, 3 macros existed, the only way to interact with a secondary target was the focus frame. Um, but even if it is old school, I think it is still pretty practical. A good way to conceptualize it, if we're going back to a car metaphor, is maybe your side view mirrors. It's the information there should always sort of be in your peripheral. If you see sirens flashing in your side view mirrors, you know that you need to pull over, right? And kind of the same thing with your focus frame. If you see in your peripheral one target casting and it's a casting to stop, well, to kick it. And I think that's the point of your focus macro or your focus frame that's different than your arena frames. The thing that sort of makes it important is because it isolates one target.
Yeah.
Again, arenas, going back to tunnel vision, there's a lot to pay attention to in arena, and it's good to sort of isolate information when you can. So if so say you're on the offensive and you're ready to score a kill, you have your interrupt ready. Well, you can just put the healer on focus and get ready to focus interrupt them while you kill the kill target, right? It's a very practical solution to a lot of problems. And I think definitely focus interrupt essential. Focus crowd control also pretty essential.
Yeah. So, do you usually use your focus? Like, so let's say for your enemy team, are you focusing the enemy healer? So, because they're rarely the kill target, they're usually just the CC target, right? Or do you? Who else would you focus?
Well, it's tricky. So as a healer, as a rescue druid, I'm always focusing the target I want to cyclone, actually.
Okay.
I only I don't only focus cyclone, but I mainly focus cyclone. That allows me to keep a friendly player as my target, and it just doesn't interrupt with your healing flow whatsoever. So as a DPS, I think it gets a bit more complicated, and it really depends on the game state. So for instance, if the game is sort of in neutral, right, and you're wanting to maybe build momentum, well, then you might want to have the healer on focus to cast CC, for instance.
Okay.
But say you're kind of on the back foot and it's your team, team's in trouble, and you can see that the enemy Affliction Warlock is free, you might want to put them on focus to be ready to interrupt like UA or Haunt or something, right? So it sort of depends. This is a tricky part, is when you shouldn't just have one focus target all game. You sort of need to change that target based on what's happening.
I think that's interesting because I think many players just put the one target on focus, and then that's where they're still using Arena 1, 2, 3. Right? They're paying attention to their S Arena Gladius to figure out what they're doing for that alternative stuff, and then if they even focus at all, which is also possible they don't. Okay, now so we're in our go situation. I've CC'd the healer, right? Do I blow my offensive cooldowns right away, or do I wait until do I make sure that do I do it right away as soon as I did my CC? Let's say I'm the first to CC, I get my fear off. Do I do it then, or do I wait until somebody else has their CC on? Make sure that the healer didn't trinket right away. Like when do I use my offensives?
So if it's solo shuffle,
Yeah, Sure.
you don't even have to think about it. Like
Just do it.
you just send your cooldowns pretty much at the beginning of the game, no matter what. I mean, there are some caveats there, like say you're a Shadow Priest or a Boomkin or something, and you need to sort of build your secondary resource. You know, you need your whatever it is, your soul shards or whatever warlock or not just soul shard. What does Shadow Priest use? Uh,
Oh, the insanity.
Whatever the yeah, insanity. Yeah, so you have to maybe build your insanity before you can actually do any damage.
Mhm.
So there are some exceptions to that, but by and large, once you sort of have a little bit of damage going, like whatever it is, like you get your one or two things out of the way, then you just sort of immediately pop cooldowns. In fact,
Mhm.
it's funny if you go watch a lot of feral druids, um, they are literally pressing incarnation as the very first button that they press. Like that is, they go stealth and they instantly incarn on the opener. That's
Wow.
very, very common. So
Okay. So that's still a shuffle.
yeah, that's
Just
solo
send it.
shuffle. And honestly, I mean, it's probably somewhat similar in 3v3. Again, there are some exceptions, right? If you are playing a specific comp that is heavily reliant on doing very coordinated CC heavy setups, then maybe you delay your cooldowns for when CC lands. But again, by and large, in solo shuffle, as early as you can possibly press your cooldowns, you want to be pressing them.
Okay.
Even without CC on the healer, it's still going to be worth it.
All right. Okay. Well, okay. So that makes it easy. Just so offensive CDs, solo shuffle, just send it like right off the go, and then I guess when they come back up, just send them again,
Exactly. Yeah.
regardless of
So
teammates.
here's the problem you run into. If you hold on to your cooldowns,
Mm-hmm.
you might run into a problem where you don't have win a win condition or a kill window at a very crucial part of the game. So typically, I mean, the way dampening works in solo shuffle is typically games end before 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, so they so basically what you if you're using your cooldowns instantly, like within 30 seconds of the game starting,
Yeah.
that means, if it's a 2-minute cooldown, then it's going to come up at that very crucial time period where dampening is really high, and you can kind of finish the game with your second cooldown. There's a problem that a lot of so this even applies to healers. Every healer has some sort of button they should typically be pressing really, really early into the game, even if there's no crazy damage happening.
Okay.
I'll, I'll give you a really good example. We're doing a VOD review for a Holy Paladin,
Okay.
who held on to his wings in the opener of his whole shuffle. He's like, my partners aren't taking damage, and why would I wings?
Yep.
Um, so okay, he then maybe a minute later he presses his wings when he's under a little bit of stress. Okay, so now he doesn't have wings for 2 minutes. Okay, then we hit the 2-minute mark of the match. Now dampening's really high.
Yep.
He doesn't have his wings, but the enemy team has their cooldowns ready.
Because it's
And so you
been
can kind
three
of
minutes
see.
and they cooled off. Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's sort of nice to keep things aligned in that way.
Okay.
It just makes the game flow a bit better.
Okay.
As backwards as it sounds, sometimes you just, as a healer, you just press your 2-minute healing cooldown, knowing that maybe it's not going to do too much, but you're going to need it later.
Interesting. But hold on. So let's say solo shuffle. We all run in. I pop my cooldowns. My teammates pop theirs too. Everybody pops their cooldowns. Some people go up, some people go down, but we all stay alive. And then 3 minutes later, high dampening. We all do that again, and invariably somebody's going to die.
Right.
Or we all run in. My team, I throw up my defensive. My team throws up all their offensives. I wait 30 seconds, and the enemy, their shields down now. They're all at cooldowns, and then I do my cooldowns, and they're not able to defend against it, and then just my team alone, just with like maybe a clutch CC or something like that, we get the win. No?
That would be, I mean, that certainly can happen. I'm not saying that's an impossibility, but it's quite risky.
Okay.
Solo Shuffle is kind of like a giant game of tug of war, right?
Fair. Yeah, yeah.
And you need to be matching the momentum of the enemy team at all times. Otherwise, you sort of, using the tug of war analogy, okay, you don't pop your offensives in the opener, but the enemy team did. Well, now the enemy team has an advantage. Now they're close to pulling you over the line, right?
Yeah.
And okay, maybe you can potentially squeeze out a kill, but it's sort of, it can be risky.
Yep.
It's important to match momentum in that game mode for sure.
Okay. Now here's another question, because they're going to use their defensives, right? Like I pop
Yep.
my cooldown, my teammates pop their cooldowns. The enemy team's weak auras are probably screaming at them, so they pop their walls.
Yep.
So now my damage doesn't do a lot because we're all defending against everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like should I care what my target is? Should I like, okay, I'm targeting the priest, but he or she they faded, right? The healer
Yeah.
faded, or the shaman threw down their bulwark, right? Like I'm not going to do anything to them.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has their CDs. Like, does it matter? Do I like try to, do I notice that the warrior doesn't have their CD, their defensive up, and so I send it into them?
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you want to, again, it's Solo Shuffle is definitely a game mode that's momentum is key. Anything you can do to just maximize damage done at all times
Okay.
is going to, that's how you win, essentially. And it's you can kind of see maybe why some specs do very well in Solo Shuffle. Like, for instance, Ellie Shaman. If someone pops a defensive in the face of an Ellie Shaman, they can just instantly turn to someone else and start hitting them, right?
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. This is also kind of why melee can sometimes struggle a bit in certain lobbies. Like,
Mhm.
the mage popped their alter time and blinked across the map, but can't really swap to the warlock because they're also across the map and somewhere completely
Yeah.
different. So, it's but you always want to be carrying your momentum in any way you can. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's be honest. That works in any mode. That's not just shuffle. That's
Right.
arena. That's RBGs. It's blitz. You know it's arguably in world PvP. Um, Chances are you're either going to be 1v4ing or 4v1ing something. So, eh?
Yep.
All right. So, should I pop my CDs as soon as my weak order? Yeah, as soon as I hear the air horn. Like,
Most of the times, yes. I mean, if you're the kill target 100% of the time, yes. And it's really good if you play DPS to trade high on HP. I mean,
okay.
basically every spec has two different types of cooldowns. You have like this small efficient cooldown, which for
Mm-hmm.
warlocks that'd be your dark pact, and then you have a bigger cooldown, your unending resolve. So you have
Yep.
your small wall and you have your big wall. You always want to be pressing your small wall into big damage 100% of the time. It's really important, especially in solo shuffle. You don't be greedy. Press it high on HP.
Okay.
Because again, all about momentum. You
Mm-hmm.
want to slow the game down as much as you can, and that's why you're gonna do it. Now, if you're not being targeted, should you pop your defensive? This can be a bit tricky. It depends on the comp you're facing, right? If you're playing against, for instance, a Frosty K, yes, because they're gonna be cleaving your entire team. So
Mm-hmm.
you might not be the one getting targeted, but you're going to be taking some damage if you don't pop a
Yep.
defensive. So, and that's kind of how a lot of classes work is they do a lot of residual damage or splash over damage. So it's kind of a good idea no matter what to pop a defensive into certain specs, even if you're not being targeted. just because you will be taking AoE damage or cleave damage inevitably.
Yeah. Okay. So weak aura, air horn. Look at what the symbol. See that it's the warrior. Pop their CD. Look at who the warrior is targeting. Oh shit, it's me. Pop my defensive.
Yep.
Look at realize that the warrior is targeting the mage that's sitting right beside me, and he just blinked halfway across the map. Okay, I'm gonna pop my defensive because I know the warrior's gonna come right onto me right now because I'm right there, right?
Yes.
Or be like, okay, I'm halfway across the map at another pillar. I've been lobbing shadow bolts, and the warrior is at the other pillar with the mage. I don't worry until the warrior is stupid enough to heroic leap over to me and is now behind the pillar. And okay, maybe I'll pop my defensive, but at the same time, I'm probably going to be stunning them and killing them.
Right.
Okay. Now to remember that when it comes to time and not freak out.
Yes.
That's
Yeah, I mean I think a really good thing to realize, or a good sort of goal for any player again who's trying to jump into the intermediate categories is to kind of recognize that arena is somewhat predictable. Of course, there's every game is going to be a little bit different, but
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of count on some things happening every single game. Can kind of count that the enemy team is going to be popping offensives pretty early. And it's like, okay, well, I just need to pop my wall. That's all I can do.
Yep.
If as long as I just do that, I'm fine. Don't overthink it. Don't try to, be too crafty. Just play by the book and you're going to be fine. And
Yep.
there's quite something quite nice about realizing that okay, most of these games are actually kind of similar. And also, I mean, I was having a conversation with Zen
Yep.
because what we're talking about, I'm actually turning into a video. um,
Everything you talk
I'm
about
working on
turns
it.
into a video. This is awesome.
And so, because he's the one who told me, I was asking him, well, should the enemy, or I'm sorry, should both DPS pop their defensives when they hear the air horns? And he said yes.
Yep.
He said the reason is because there's something sort of mentally good about mentally comforting about your entire team staying high HP. If
Yep.
your whole team is high HP, you kind of have that confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if someone starts dying on your team or
Yeah.
everyone starts dying, that's
Yeah.
when panic mode,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's sort of nice mentally, even if you're not being targeted, to sort of prevent your team from taking damage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because then you'll feel more confident and you'll probably play better. So I like that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I felt that. I tried healing once, and watching my whole team start to die is like you get that like lump up in the throat, and your whole body kind of
Oof.
tightens because you're like, oh crap, we
Yeah,
need to heal people.
y-
You know. And if you can't
exactly.
do like big AoE heals, like I was doing disc priest, and it was a little nerve wracking. Um,
Oh yeah.
so it's interesting. So Zen said everybody should pop their defensives at the same time. Okay. Which is funny because I remember like I was playing one game and I died in an opener. I got CC'd and I am dying in the CC. And then the
Hmm.
healer turned to me and said, "Why don't you pop your trinket?" And I was like, "I thought I was supposed to hold my trinket. Why didn't you pop yours and heal?" He's like, "No, no, no. I save mine for last. I'm the healer. Your DPS, you pop your trinket first, and then do your
Yeah.
defensive." Is that expected? Like, is that the default? Is that as DPS, I should do that first?
It's very tricky because, for instance, if it's a rogue,
Mm-hmm.
a sub rogue, you don't want to be trinketing like anything other than smoke bomb. So that can be one thing. If you're a healer, you do want to be holding on to your trinket, I would argue. Um,
Okay.
but it kind of depends. Like, yeah, I would in that particular case, like because especially if you're playing a class that can press their defensive while CC'd, which I think you can press Unending Resolve while CC'd too. So I think, I don't know.
No, shoot. Oh, shoot. No, I can't remember.
You can
There's
while stunned. But
yeah.
you can press Dark Pack while stunned. So
Yes, you can.
if
Yeah.
if you okay, so you get stunned in the opener, immediately Dark Pack. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh shoot, my healer CC'd. They broke the Dark Pack. Maybe then you could think about a Trinket Port, right? Do something to immediately stop taking damage. But that's really tricky. I mean, negotiating cooldowns like that it gets a bit difficult. That's why it's kind of nice. I would say the onus is on the DPS to trade.
Okay.
And your healer is kind of wanting you to trade.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just saying that as a healer. Your healer is sort of expecting it. But I mean, at the same time, if I'm playing a healer and I'm seeing my DPS are not pressing a cooldown, I need to press. Like it's that's why it kind of gets tricky. It's like he's right, but at the same time, you can't be stubborn, right?
Yeah.
If I think as a healer, you should have the mindset of I need to keep my teammates alive. Regardless of whether or not I agree that it's a good defensive trade in the moment, right? I need
Mhm.
to. My job is to make sure health bars do not go to 0. I need to make sure that happens. All right, and if that means I have to do something a bit suboptimally, fine. Like no big deal. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a bit tricky.
Fair enough.
But
Fair enough. Okay.
pop your
Um.
cooldowns.
Sorry, you just said trinket smoke bomb. I thought you could just walk out a smoke bomb.
Not if you're stunned.
Well, okay. So not trinketing the smoke bomb, but trinketing the stun inside the smoke bomb.
Right, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I heard that you said that. I was like, what? I've never heard that before. But yeah, okay.
Hey, that'd be cool if you trinketed and then the smoke bomb disappeared. Just like poof.
Ooh.
Like a vacuum came up from
I-
the sky and just sucked up all the dust.
I'd rather trinket shadowy duel.
I don't think you can't trinket Shadowy Duel. But that would be cool if
Yeah.
you could trinket and the Shadowy Duel disappeared.
Yeah. That's what I'd like to do. But
Yeah.
all right. Win conditions. Like this is the part that always gets me. Like, especially in solo shuffle, like you're constantly rotating different comps. Like some of them are really weird. Like so I know like RMP is pretty easy, right? Like the rogue's gonna CC, mage is gonna poly, and the rogue's gonna CC, and then we pop our CDs and nuke the one that's stunned or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But then you have like weird ones like okay, you know, arms warrior, marksman. Like okay, do we kill in the diamond's ice? Do we kill like do I stormbolt? Is it stormbolt and diamond ice? Is it or freezing trap? Like is that the win condition or not? Like I mean obviously the win condition is get somebody's health bar to 0, really.
Right.
But like how do you know? There's always like just focus the burn down the person with the most or with the least health, right? Look at the health bars, whoever has least health. Okay,
Yeah.
that doesn't always work. Like how do you even know what the win condition is, especially the solo shuffle when you're changing specs or comps so often?
Yeah, I think that there's a few different things going on here. Like there is win conditions on a class level or a spec
Okay.
level, and I
Yeah.
think that represents your task throughout the game. For instance, if you play Hunter,
Mm-hmm.
you can reliably know that your task throughout the game is going to be to stun trap the healer every time you can. Land full duration traps every time you can.
Yep.
Now, what's a bit tricky in the solo shuffle is that the real win condition is dampening. The real win condition is always damage.
Mm-hmm.
which sounds a bit silly. It sounds a bit, like, geez, like, thanks. But if you can, again, reach that 2-minute mark and you have your cooldowns ready and you send your offensive cooldowns into a player, they pop defensives, and you swap to a different target, you're basically playing for the win at that point. That's all you really need to do, sort of on a fundamental level.
Mm-hmm.
Because at a certain point of dampening, there is no amount of healing the enemy healer can do to keep their team alive. So as long as you are maximizing your damage output and minimizing damage input, you are playing for your win condition in deep dampening. Now, again, there's some class specific things sort of interwoven in there. Like, if
Yep.
you're an assassination rogue, you want to be pressing kidney on cooldown. And every time you press death mark, you want to have the target be in a kidney shot. You kind of want to do these fundamental things at the same time. Like, for instance, I was playing Boomkin today.
Okay.
Boomkin's a bit interesting right now because you have 2 charges of incarnation. So, uh, that sounds kind of like OP. I mean, it is OP, but it's like, oh, well, why would just send both of your incarn charges back to back, and then at least one charge will be up in the late game? Well, yes, but in order to maximize my damage, I also need my treants,
Yes.
which have a 30-second cooldown. So even though I can technically incarn back to back, I want to be lining up my incarn with my treants every time, just because the damage amp is just like so much. It's, you're
Yeah.
leaving a lot of damage on the table. So you can kind of be patient with some cooldowns like that. Like, that's playing into your win condition too. Man, as a boomkin, aside from root beaming the healer on cooldown, I want to be
Mhm.
lining up my treants with my incarn on cooldown.
Yep.
And if I can do both of those things, I'm more or less doing what I need to do. I mean, there's going to be, again, I need a cyclone sometime in there, but that is sort of an accessory to sort of the bigger picture things that are going on.
Now, but intermediate wise, you also have to pay attention to DRs, right? Like, so
Yes.
let's say Hunter again. Go back to stun trap. Stun trap isn't going to work very well if I don't know, your partner also has some sort of in cap or a stun. In which case, your stun may have DR'd completely, or your in cap. Let's say it's I think Demon Hunter in prison DR's trap, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, or the very common lobby that can be a bit hard is Hunter Mage. Whenever you have a Hunter and a Mage on your same team, things
Yes.
can feel a bit weird.
Yep. So exactly. Um, so is that another thing? Like, don't now I need a DR tracker in order to make sure that when I go to do my win condition, that it's not going to completely fail because the other player did their win condition already and just DR'd all of my CC.
Yeah, I mean, you should check DRs before doing any big commitment CC, like a freezing trap, for instance. You don't want to be trapping for 2 seconds. It's a quarter DR.
That would suck.
And yeah, if you're a rogue, you don't want to be pressing kidney into a target that's fully DR'd, right? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's always going to be worth it to check um, that first. It's the win condition in WoW hasn't really changed too much for in the past 20 years.
Mm-mm.
Lineup control,
Yep.
lockdown with burst, and that's how people's HP goes to 0.
Yeah.
um,
I mean, ultimately, that's a
most,
win condition. It's, again,
yes,
somebody's got to die.
someone's gotta die. Yep.
All right. I think so. That's a lot of information we just talked about. Like, that was a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Um, Ultimately, if I get the feel for it, there's some basic stuff there into some intermediate. Really, the intermediate stuff is just that better level of knowledge, that better level of awareness will elevate you beyond, which sounds like a bunch of basics, but when you put it all together, makes you a very competent player to begin with, and then everything else just goes up from there with your awareness. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think people like to use the expression scripted PvP. And they use that expression for a reason. It's like, well, every arena game is kind of structured in this particular way, and games are relatively predictable.
Mm-hmm.
There is chaos, but there's sort of order within that chaos. And I think that's sort of the true goal of reaching that intermediate level, is to be in a place where you can kind of understand that the game is relatively telegraphed.
Yep.
And that you sort of just need to do the same thing over and over and over and get better at doing that same thing,
Mm.
and that will get you pretty far.
Well, and we kind of talked about that. Like, so in the telegraphing, you know, a warlock needs to cast XYZ in a certain rotation in order to maximize it. Well, we even we talked about it a couple episodes ago, right? So you have your curses up, and then you do your haunt, you do your soul rot, and then you do your malefic, and just watch somebody disappear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if you see the warlock do haunt, and UA, then or UA and the haunt, chances are they're ramping up pretty good. You should probably look at
Yeah.
at stopping them, right? So kick them,
Yeah.
CC them something, right? That's the telegraph. And I think the other part is that's again to the interrupts, or your in your add-ons. So your Omnibar, or your Omni Auras, you see the rogue CCs coming off cooldown. Well, that means the go is about to go. So you should probably be ready to push your defensives. Um, you know, or no, notice that their kicks are on cooldown, and so you're free to just go, because nobody's going to be able to stop you unless they're able to get
Right.
CC on you. So I think that's what you're talking about, but I think that's also the little tweak that just takes somebody from 17 to 18 or 18 to 2K is knowing when to stop that go, know when the telegraph is about to happen, because you have the information. You just need to see what that means, and then be prepared to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can just get like into this rhythm of noticing patterns in
Yeah.
an arena, and
Yes.
react to those patterns accordingly over and over and over, and that's how you PvP.
Indeed. So speaking of reacting to patterns, what's the one thing you would change?
One thing I would change, um, there was a Reddit post recently, uh, that was on the top of the not the World of PvP subreddit, but the WoW subreddit,
Oh, no.
saying, I mean, it's just, you don't have to beat around the bush. Like, WoW is not a beginner friendly game, and sort of the learning experience within WoW is quite unsubstantial. Like, if you're completely new to WoW,
Yeah.
you breeze through questing,
Mm-hmm.
really quickly. And the game, it tries to teach you things, but doesn't teach you everything, right?
Nope.
And this post is saying, one of the arguments made in this post, which I actually kind of agree with, is like, should new players be allowed to make tanks? Because this guy was saying it's really frustrating when you have a player who's clearly never played before as the tank in your group, and it's not good, right?
Yep.
And maybe that sounds a bit like gatekeepy to say, but that kind of makes sense. It's like, well, should a
Mm-hmm.
new player be tanking a dungeon? That's a lot of responsibilities and kind of requires a bit more game knowledge. So, the one thing I would change is sort of making the path from true beginner to intermediate player a bit, well, I guess making the path from true beginner to, you know, beginner light would probably be what I would want to change. And I don't know how to exactly do that. Very complicated thing, but there
Yep.
definitely needs to be more in-game stuff for learning WoW, for sure.
Yeah. I feel like back in the day with when World of Warcraft was first out, there wasn't a lot of information out there. We're all starving for information. We kind of like learned as either we did a bunch of experimentation to learn it, but we had the time to do that because it was a very slow roll from 0 to 60. Um, and we're all sharing information because we're all trying to figure it out, right, and help each other do really well. I think nowadays a lot of beginner players, there's no time. Like you said, like you just breathe. Next, you're max level, and it's like, okay, have it at the world now. And it's like, but I just went through the world, um, and I think you're not wrong in that. Also, while there's a whole bunch of information out there, it's almost too much information, and you don't know where to start looking, especially as a new player. And a lot of people have figured it out by now. So then when they go asking for help or for information, everybody's like, "Oh, just Google it." It's like, well, what do I even Google? Right.
Yeah,
So,
one of the things I would like to do, maybe in some future iteration of the skill cap UI, is have like, say you're in a solo shuffle round
mhm.
and you're playing against whatever, and it doesn't matter in the comp. But wouldn't it be nice if you like a little journal pops up and maybe tells you what enemy cooldowns, what cooldowns the enemy team has, their main abilities, and you could
Mhm.
just like, mouse over it and say, oh, okay, the fire mage, they combust, and
Yeah.
hunter, they, beast of wrath. It's like, well, that could maybe give you some signaling as to, what you need to be looking out for, and sort of teach you something along the ways.
Yeah.
So I think something like that would be nice, like some sort of built, some in-game system where you can sort of learn, would be
We
immensely
we
helpful.
have a little paperclip float in and say, "Watch out for fire breath," and then I'll float back out.
Exactly, yeah.
That's interesting. I think. Ooh, what was I gonna say? I had an idea. I think for my one thing, I would change. Um, hmm. I had it and now it's gone. Dang it. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Brackets. We said this before. I saw it on X a little while ago. I've seen it on Reddit. I've seen it a bunch of places. Is have the gold, diamond, platinum, whatever. But like, so when a player reaches elite, let's say 1800, they don't fall back down. So they're
Yeah.
so then you can't. It really stops the players. Obviously they can still make an alt and they can push an alt back through all the brackets, but you don't have these players that then just like destroy their CR to drop back down to like 1500 and just wreck players down at the bottom. You know, feel OP
Yeah.
by squashing noobs. I don't know. I
Yeah,
think
the
that's
rating system is definitely in need of some
just the rating system.
overall.
Yeah. All right.
So,
Gosh,
something needs to change, yeah.
something needs. That's a whole other topic. I'm not going to get into it. Let's get into the news, though.
All right. Who ordered up an extra large can of whoop ass?
All right. We got to. I feel like we're about to go on a major tangent there. News. If anybody was watching, the Mythic Dungeon International Group B happened back, finished on the 10th of November. Big congratulations to Mandatory for winning that group cup. AWC Grand Finals finished last weekend. Did you watch this?
I did, yes.
What'd you think?
I was the ILTU or ITLU. I don't remember the name of that
ILTU.
team exactly. Yeah, that was an exciting team to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Almost made it to the very end. Came in a little bit short, but they managed to climb through the entire gauntlet and make it to the grand finals. Very impressive.
Yeah, that was
Um,
and knocked Echo into the lowers there.
yes. NA. So for the very first time, I enjoyed watching EU more than I enjoyed watching NA.
Mhm.
I am not a fan of that Feral, Shadow Priest, Holy Paladin comp. I mean the games were fine, but it's just like, man, they was just kind of hard to follow. Like it's one of those matchups where I don't really know who is truly winning, and
Mhm.
I don't like that. Like those games are all like 7 minutes long. Right? They were
They are long.
dampeners.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, definitely really good players playing, but I was just not very exciting on NA for the first time. But probably gonna change for next season. I'm gonna probably see some hopefully different comp variety. Also, I'm probably going to be seeing hotfixes tomorrow or Friday, presumably, now that
Oh,
competitions are over.
we're
But we'll
hoping.
see.
We're hoping. We'll see.
Yeah.
Do you think it's gonna be this week, or do you think they're going to wait until after MDI? And I know PvP
That
tuning doesn't. Yeah, but
that's a really good question. I I mean, I hope they have some tuning this Thursday or Friday.
mhm.
I'm not going to bet my money on it. I'm
Yeah.
because I have no idea how, you know, how that works internally. Like
Mhm.
whether they want to separate the tuning. I mean, but I don't know. But we're definitely going to see tuning next week, 100%. I'll bet my money on that. But this week, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Probably, but
I
I'm
think
not
you're
sure.
not wrong. I think I think if they know that they're going to tweak PvE, like the main base, I don't think they're going to put in the PvP tuning.
Yeah.
Versus if they know that they're good with the class in PvE and they just need to tweak for PvP, then we'll see the tuning.
Yes.
I think that's fair. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll agree. I personally found the EU way more exciting and it felt better to watch.
Yep.
The NA, I started. It was so chaotic, and then like part of it though, like the games are so long, I was kind of falling. I was losing interest. My attention was being pulled away from the game.
Remind me
So,
of a BFA, Cloud
oh
Nine.
yes, yes, 10-minute games into the damp of damps.
Yep.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. Um, I think one person on Reddit was expressing their disinterest about AWC only because I think for even though like yeah EU was a little bit more exciting, but even then like you knew Echo was going to win, so
Yeah.
I guess it's no different
I
than like any traditional sport where you have two teams and one team is always clearly the better. Like the team's still going to win even though it's cool the underdog made it, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that team is definitely the all-time dream team in WoW PvP.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to maybe I don't want to use his name, but I was talking to an AWC competitor about that team,
Yep.
an EU competitor, and I asked, like, I kind of expressed this feeling like, is it even worth trying on EU because the outcome is kind of already predetermined?
Yep.
And he explained that there are like conditions where Echo might be weak. For instance, Med doesn't play Resto Druid.
Okay.
And not saying he couldn't play Resto Druid, but if Resto Druid becomes meta again and there's a really, really good non-rogue mage comp that works really, really well with Resto Druid, I mean that might make EU a bit more competitive. But I mean right now, Priest is really good, Paladin's really good, Dragon's really good, Med plays all three, and then Rogue Mage
Yeah.
is always going to be a staple. It's
Yeah.
just like the conditions are pretty perfect for that team having a streak of dominance, but
Of
that
course.
could change in the future.
Yeah. I It reminds me again back to Cloud9. I think Snuts was expressing. I think it's Snuts. Was it Snuts or Chanimal? Who was on? Snuts was on
They're
Cloud9,
they're,
right?
they're both on Cloud9, yeah.
Were they? Okay. Shoot, was one of them was expressing how everybody was like hoping that they lose because they always win, right? And
Yeah.
they're disappointed by that. But I think also Again, it felt watching was like, okay, it's kind of exciting. I can see anybody still wanting to compete because, you know, second place still gets a bunch of money. Maybe you didn't get first place, but you still like get some winnings out of it. So worthwhile competing. But I can imagine being number one that long is also somewhat stressful. Not only like, you know, defending your title, but also the amount of community pressure that you must feel because you're winning
Yeah,
that long as well. Yeah, it's just I feel bad for them
yeah.
if they're getting bad pressure. But yeah,
I will say this: MVP of the tournament or the season one AWC, definitely Thessia. Thessia was
oh,
the most
right,
exciting player to watch
oh
in a
right,
long time.
yeah.
So I enjoyed every single ice wall. You know, you always sat up in your
he
seat. You're like, oh,
he carries some games hard.
yes.
Yeah. All right. So if you haven't, if you're listening and you haven't watched it, please go watch it. Sorry that we ruined who won, but still, well, actually, I guess we didn't. So Echo won on the EU. Welcome to the Jung won for NA. So congrats to both of them. I'm sure we'll see some tweets later with them getting their medals and that. But yeah, really good matches. Regardless of what we said, overall, I'd say the tournament itself was really good. So if you want to check that out, hot fixes, not a lot for the EU or sorry EU, yeah, not a lot for PvP or for retail. They did put in to or not today. I was on the 18th, but Cataclysm Classic. They added in some bloodthirsty items for jewel crafting, and leatherworking, and tailoring. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
nice. Get some bloodthirsty equipment there for characters to make.
Yeah.
Help people start off with PvP. Otherwise, I haven't really seen much.
No, I mean one news. I don't know if we went over this, but Conquest was uncapped. So
Oh,
if you're
yes, we
a
did not mention
PvPer,
that. Yeah.
right now is a good time to be playing the game. You
Hmm.
can farm Conquest. They have the Conquest boxes,
Yes.
which you can send to your alts.
How do you feel?
So
I was expecting them to allow for well, there's conversations about them allowing conquest transfers. I wasn't sure if they were going to do it really. I'm
they
not
definitely
surprised they let.
should.
Yeah, you think so?
Yes, because you have to craft a lot of gear this season, and you need those Conquest tokens to craft any piece.
Mm-hmm.
So the Conquest boxes aren't necessarily a good thing. Right? Because I don't know if you can get the crafting tokens from the boxes.
Ooh, I
Yeah, I
don't
think you can
know.
only get the gear. So that's a problem, I think,
Mm-hmm.
since
Yeah,
most specs seem to craft quite a bit.
yeah, that's true. Actually, one other piece. Shout out to Mortai for this. I saw he made a comment on Twitter or on X and pointed into our Discord as well. But again, BG Blitz being new, it wasn't factored. The rating gain from BG Blitz wasn't factored into a criteria for the boxes. So you have to be over 1400 rating to buy the purchase or to purchase those boxes, and it doesn't recognize solo BG. So
Oh.
hopefully they'll
Wah,
fix
wah,
that.
wah.
Yeah, they'll fix it. They did before
Yeah.
with other things, but yeah, that's something else that they forgot about when they made Blitz and made it rated. Yeah, maybe there'll be a hot fix next time we talk. So here are a couple of things. WoW Direct went out. That was part of their 30th anniversary of Warcraft, 20th anniversary of World of Warcraft. Not a lot that was posted for PvP. There was hints. So obviously, the new the Siren Isle or whatever is going to be coming out soon. They also talked about a new Plunder Storm, working from lessons learned last time. My understanding is that there's going to be a currency now, so you can actually purchase some items as well. So,
Yeah.
less RNG for getting stuff, I guess, getting abilities. And they hinted at definitely not this expansion, but the next one in Midnight, they're talking about player housing. So, my question for you, Big, is what's the first PvP thing that you're going to put on your house?
Ah, are we assuming there's going to be like mounts and tabards and or
Maybe a
like
pennant or something? Yeah. Maybe a big neon sign that says Gladiator. I don't know.
finally getting used out of those pennants that they keep on giving away from
Right.
different things. I want there to be. Oh, gee, I don't know. I don't even know what I would want in what PvP thing I'd want in the
Huh.
house. You know how I want a taxidermied BM hunter. That's
Be careful, because if you say that, there's going to be somebody that's going to want a taxidermy night elf druid.
oh, that's cool.
Just
I'm fine
saying.
with it.
Just
But,
saying.
but yeah,
I want
something like that.
I want to be able, if I can, maybe rating limited, purchase the conquest points, but I want a digital version of the AWC trophy that I can put.
Oh, oh, geez, you just made me realize. You
What?
know for a fact what player housing means, right? There's infinite monetization there.
Oh
Blizzard
yeah.
is smart, you know.
Yep.
It's like, you know what I think it is.
Mm-mm.
No joke. It's like they have a lever, okay? They have a bunch of levers, okay? And they look at their sales
Yeah.
and they pull. It's like, okay, sales are low right now and revenue's dipping. Okay, $90 amount. Let's pull that lever.
Bruisaur
And then
dunk. Yeah.
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Okay, revenue's falling again. Player housing. Poof.
Yeah.
It's like let's that's
So
what's happening.
I want to put on my tinfoil hat really quick and
Yeah.
say player housing has been something that players have been asking for 20 years. Within a year of Microsoft buying Blizzard, Activision Blizzard, we're getting player housing.
Yeah. I remember what's her name? Holly Longdale?
Yeah.
Was she part of that? I think she was, right? She was part of Microsoft, maybe?
No, she joined before that. She originally joined into the classic team and has now moved herself up to, she's now the executive director.
Because
So
whatever company, I remember reading a thread. I don't know if it was true that whatever company she was working for previously had just like a ton of monetization, like,
yeah,
and
probably.
so maybe that's design by design, right? Like
Yep.
part of that culture now.
Yeah, maybe. I mean
Hey,
that there has been some more monetization coming into the game recently, so we'll see.
can I say something really quick?
Sure.
Uh, I the thing that's worrying me, it's become quite apparent that with the amount that Blizzard is developing, that the quality of the product is getting a little bit worse. And what I mean by quality is there have probably been more bugs in the
Yep.
past two expansions than at any other time that I've been playing this game.
Yep.
And I know they did a lot of QA layoffs, and it just seems like, what I know about software development is, it's like a giant stack. You just have to work your way through that stack, right? And I'm just worried that with this increased cadence and the amount of stuff Blizzard's doing, that just like the base game,
Mm.
although it's, kind of pretty, it's just a bit clunky.
Well, and there's
And
there's
I'm worried.
talents that are still interacting incorrectly, that have bugs in them. They're not working correctly, and we're pushing on to 11.0.7, pushing on to 11.1. No sign of
Yeah.
that stuff being fixed. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
not good.
I don't know if they're fixing it in the background and it's just like a super bad bug and they're having a hard time. The engineers are just, racking the brain on how to actually make it work, or if it's, well, don't worry about it. People aren't picking it anyways. We'll just move, ignore it. We'll fix it in the next expansion, right? We'll
Yeah.
fix it in 12. We'll fix it in 13. So I don't know. I should. I kind of misspoke. I said there was no real PvP news in the WoW Direct. There kind of was.
The
Uh,
map.
pardon me.
The map.
No, as the classic fresh.
Oh, yeah.
So they announced that
Classic,
they're
classic.
classic. Yes. So they're bringing out classic fresh servers, and they are going to make some PvP. Now two things. One is they said that they're going to enforce faction balancing. So if you're Alliance and you have more friends that are Alliance and you want them to join the server, but there's not enough, more Horde haven't joined, your friends can't join. So that's going to be a thing. The other thing is there's no RP PvP servers. Apparently they're just doing PvE and PvP, no RP rule sets. So I feel like that's a miss. I don't know. I feel like there's some controversy behind this. I know there's always like the people that say RP's dumb, and other people are like RP is life. I don't know. Like what do you played on RP servers, didn't you, Big?
Yeah, I like RP servers.
Yeah. Like I feel like RP servers maintain the life of the server after the raid is done and after after all that.
Yeah, I think being on a big PvP server or a big RP PvP server is really fun because there's a lot of activity out in the outside Stormwind or outside not Ironforge, Orgrimmar.
Yep.
There's a sort of social element to the game that comes out there.
Yeah, I agree. So I feel like that's a miss, but apparently they're not doing it. I guess because it's classic, and maybe they feel they already have enough RP realms. I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll see. The other thing, and this kind of impacts PvP because PvE gear and gold is needed, but apparently they're not doing any GDKP for they're instituting that rule set again for the classic fresh. So
Okay.
no gold earning. So or being able to buy your way through gear. That's
We'll see how people avoid that.
yeah.
I'm sure
We'll
there's
see.
some way that people work around that.
Probably. But I think that's it for news that I'm aware of. Big onto you. Shout outs before we roll it out.
Shout out to Mystical
Oh
for
yes.
being a cool Mistweaver monk. Shout out to
Yes.
Mystical.
Good shout out. I'm going to shout out to all the wonderful people who have so far signed up to our tournament and also listened to my kind request for them to go out to their friends and get more people, because for a period of time there, I was really worried we weren't going to have very many contestants, and in the past week it has definitely ballooned. So thank you to all those people. And last but not least, going for the outro, do you want to list off where our listeners can reach us, Big?
Yes, I can. You can contact us directly with a tweet to @technically_PvP or by an email to technicallypvp@gmail.com. You can also join our discussions on the Bonus Roll Productions Discord. Also, you can visit the Bonus Roll website to find the podcast directory with us and many other great shows at bonusroll.gg. This directory also has a review system, so head on over there and tell everyone what you think of your favorite shows.
Indeed. And as always, links for everything we talked about are going to be in the show notes. I want to thank everyone for listening. Good night, everybody.